a person's age influences their relationship with technology, which influences decisions they make about how they might be victimized. But really it boils down more to roles.
Hi, I'm Joan Goodchild, Editor-in-Chief of CSO, and welcome to another edition of Security Sessions, where we talk about trends and topics and issues important to security managers. Today we are with Ted Harrington. He's with Independent Security Evaluators. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to be talking about kind of a fun topic today, which is generational differences when it comes to security. Now, Ted's connection with this issue is that through ISE's work, they do a lot of training and deal with a lot of different generations, and through that kind of identifying challenges around awareness and company securities and helping them kind of navigate some of that. So it should be kind of a fun topic to deal with. First of all, let's talk about the concept of security and privacy, and whether it's generational or not. Do people kind of confuse those two terms a little bit?
I see those two confused pretty frequently.
Yeah.
They obviously are related, but they're distinct. Privacy is, of course, the decision by an individual about who has access to their information. And security is the performance of those systems that safeguard that information to make sure that only people or individuals who are authorized actually do have access to that information.
So how does that break down in a generational way? I mean, how do boomers view privacy as opposed to how millennials do? And what are some of kind of the influencing factors there with how they were brought up and why they view them the way they do?
Sure. And I'm glad you chose those two particulars because they are probably in the highest contrast. When you think about millennials and their relationship with technology, they've never not known technology. They've never not known the internet. They've never not known mobile phones and things of that nature. So they have a lot of ease of use. It's second nature to them using these types of platforms. Millennials also make up a lot of the entry to mid-level of the typical workforce. By contrast, baby boomers, who make up many of the executives, including CISOs and other types of senior leaders, they remember a time before the internet and before mobile phones and things like that. So for that group, some of them are very savvy at technology, and some have been late adopters or in some cases not adopted at all. So their relationship with technology is very different. And when you think about relationships with technology, that directly plays into perceptions of privacy. So baby boomers generally are a little more skeptical about sharing some of their private information in an electronic format. Some are, of course, very enthusiastic about it, but on the trend, more are reticent on that front. Whereas by contrast, millennials, they almost don't even see the concept of privacy and generally speaking are very comfortable sharing many details about their lives through technology, social media, other platforms.
So what does that mean for security then for a company? What are sort of some of the main conduits that, where a boomer might be vulnerable to, letting someone access information they should not, contrasted with how that might happen with a millennial?
Sure. Each of those two groups will probably be targeted in slightly different ways because their relationship with technology influences some of their behaviors. So baby boomers, because of their generalized lower sense of trust of the internet and certain forms of technology, are a little bit more hesitant to share sensitive information, whether it's about themselves or perhaps in a workplace setting, through an electronic format. Now, if they were to receive a phone call, a platform of communication that they have experienced their whole lives and they're very comfortable with, they may more readily be susceptible to a social engineering attack that's performed live in that manner. By contrast, a millennial who has a lower inhibition when it comes to privacy, when they're interacting with electronic formats, such as a web form, their hesitation to share certain information might be lower because they're so familiar with it. This is how they communicate, and attackers know that and would potentially try to take advantage of that.
How is that breakdown in sort of a role-based way? I mean, where do we see some of these different generations falling into different roles now with the, the way folks are aged, and how might that matter depending on, the position that they hold?
Sure. Primarily when we think about privacy as it relates to security training, we're slightly less focused on an individual's age. It is important because a person's age influences their relationship with technology, which influences decisions they make about how they might be victimized. But really it boils down more to roles, and to some extent those roles are actually relevant to age. But the three primary types of roles that we see when it comes to a training perspective are, on one level, executives. Executives tend to be baby boomers and some of the older generations. They're more experienced, and that's how they're in those positions. Mm-hmm. Your second group would be end users. End users really cover the gamut from millennials to baby boomers, depending on what position they hold in a particular company. And then the third group is developers. Developers today are predominantly in the millennial category. There are obviously members of other groups as well.
Yep.
And what's interesting to think about those three different groups is that they all have different access to different information, they have different needs, and they would potentially be victimized in different ways and for different reasons. And that's why we break it down that way. But that's more or less how it maps to generational differences.
And how come Generation X never gets any attention? I'm Generation X, and I feel like we never get brought up in studies or research or anything. Is it because we're too small to care about?
I think that's a good question. My guess would be it's because baby boomers and millennials are the two biggest groups right now.
Yeah.
And millennials are about to change the workforce. They're about to change how even housing markets operate because there's so many of them. And the millennial generation is so tied to technology that I just think that what millennials are doing is driving innovation, and that's why everyone pays attention to them. And then their stark contrast is baby boomers. So you're not forgotten, you're still loved, but that's why.
So takeaway then, I mean, you talked a little bit about the message being based on the role though, but any other kind of training takeaways or anything that you advise folks on when it comes to different messages for generations? Or is that not really the right direction to go in?
No, it's a really good question. The most important thing when it comes to training is to think about how to take individuals and increase their level of maturity when it comes to security. So many people who don't receive any sort of training don't understand even basic things like why you should use unique passwords for different services or why you should use good passwords. They just see passwords as an inhibitor. And so in that example, what you're trying to do is help that person just get to that next level and understand the why behind things like passwords.
Right. And why 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is not a good password to use, even though it's the easiest.
It is not a good password.
All right, great. I want to thank Ted Harrington of Independent Security Evaluators for joining us today. For more about generational differences and how they impact security, check out other sections of CSO. And for now, I'm Joan Goodchild. Thanks for watching.